With this video, we're now halfway through the teams that have been eliminated from the first round of the 2024 OHL playoffs, and it's been kind of fun just looking back at the season that was 23-24 and kind of taking a look as to what we can expect with these teams going into next season. And now that we've also passed the OHL priority selection, we have a bit of a clearer picture for how some of these teams are going to look. And this one in particular, I think a lot of fans are intrigued by. It's the Mississauga Steelheads, or should we start calling them the Brampton Steelheads? Because they are moving to the CAA Centre this summer, and I think it's still pending league approval. But at this point, I did an interview with Elliot Kerr, the owner of the Steelheads, talking about the relocation process. And you can actually check out that video on the channel, talk about what led to the move and just some of the key things that have taken place with the organization with their negotiations with the city of Mississauga and what they're looking forward to going to Brampton. So if you haven't seen that video, highly recommend it. It kind of gives you a little background in regards to the relocation of the Steelheads. Or it's not really a relocation because they're still the Steelheads and they're still in Peel region, but the move to Brampton. But this video is talking about the Steelheads team and how they're looking going into next year, because this could be a very exciting year coming up for the Steelheads. 2023-24, the Steelheads, they surprised many this year. They were near the top of the standings for about the first quarter of the regular season, and this is a team that's been building for the future, so they arrived a little ahead of schedule just with their play, and they kind of fell back a little bit midway through the regular season, and then near the end, they had a push, and they were threatening for top spot in the Central Division. They ended up falling 3 points short behind the North Bay Battalion, who ended up winning the Central Division. And then, of course, in the playoffs, the Steelheads had to face the Sudbury Wolves, and that one didn't go as long as I think a lot of us thought. It was a 5-game series win for the Sudbury Wolves, and now Mississauga is looking forward to next year. And this team, it has so much potential. Let's look at the top 10 scorers from the regular season for the Steelheads. Luke Misa led the way. He had 26 goals, 55 points, 55 assists, 81 points. Luke Misa, he was having an outstanding year, and it's just neat to see the Misa brothers. Michael, of course, playing with Saginaw, and Luke here with the Steelheads. And then you've got Porter Martone, second in scoring with the Steelheads, 33 goals, 38 assists, 71 points. He is going to be a big piece next year. So if you haven't seen Porter Martone play, you'll want to take note when he's out on the ice next season. And then third, it was Agnes McDonnell, 32 goals, 30 assists, 62 points. Those two players are kind of tied together after what happened at the OHL trade deadline last year, coming over from Sarnia. And they're getting the job done already with the Steelheads. So it was fun to watch those two out on the ice. Fourth in scoring, Chaz Sharp, 19 goals, 34 assists, 53 points. Of course, Sharp just the other day signing a 2-year contract with the Toronto Marlies of the American Hockey League, as Sharp was the captain of the Steelheads team, and he does a little bit of everything on that blue line. And he was even getting the points. Those 34 assists, a good sign there, getting the puck out of the zone and creating those scoring opportunities. And then they had Dean Locus. He was picked up at the trade deadline from Saginaw, 17 goals, 31 assists, good for 48 points on the season. Lucas Carmiris, 14 goals, 29 assists, 43 points on the season. Jakob Fibiger, the rookie defenseman, he was the import, 7 goals, 36 assists, good for 43 points. Fibiger, he's a very smooth skater. He's got that confidence, that swagger on the blue line, and you could just see that confidence building as the season progressed. It took him a little bit to get used to the North American game, but Jakob Fibiger, a really fun defenseman on that Steelheads blue line. And then eighth in scoring, you had Mason Zabeski, 24 goals, 11 assists, 35 points. Finn Harding, 10 goals, 24 assists, 34 points. And then Jack Van Volsen, 10th in scoring on the Steelheads team, 20 goals, 12 assists, 32 points. And for Van Volsen, it took him a little bit to get going this year. There were some question marks about his game because, of course, Mississauga picked him up from Peterborough a year ago, and they're expecting him to maybe contribute offensively similar to Martone and McDonnell. But he got off to that slow start, but near the end of the season, that's when he really started to pick things up. And things are very promising for Jack Van Volsen going into next season. The big thing, though, for the Steelheads was their goaltending. That seemed to be the difference. Ryerson Leanders played the bulk of the games. He had a record of 24, 17, and 4, a 3.12 goals against average, and a 909 save percentage. He was outstanding in net. And then their backup, Jack Ivankovic, as a rookie, had a record of 14, 5, and 2, a 272 goals against average, and a 915 save percentage. So the goaltending is solid for Mississauga going into next year. And really, I think it's the play of the goaltenders that stole the show this year and kept the Steelheads competitive throughout. And you could see that as this season went on, the confidence in front of them, the players just knew that they could take some, maybe a little more risk, but they had that confidence that their goaltender is going to bail them out, making that big save. And Leenders and Ivan Kovic, they got the job done. And I think this is a good sign for this team as they were able to learn from some of those mistakes during the regular season. And these goaltenders, I think they're only going to get better from here. This could be the best goaltender tandem in the Ontario Hockey League going into next season. And I already touched on a bit about last year's trade deadline, which saw Porter Martone and Angus McDonnell come over to Mississauga. They came over from Sarnia for that trade that saw Luca Del Bel-Beluz and Ethan Del Mastro go to Sarnia last year. And of course, the Sting only made that deal because they wanted to go for a deep run, and they went all the way to the Western Conference for the first time in franchise history. So those two players did what they expected. They wanted that deep playoff run, but they sacrificed the future quite a bit because Martone and McDonnell, they've been lighting it up with the Steelheads, and they're only going to get better from here, I believe, as well. It's similar to Leenders and Ivan Kovic, and then if Van Volsen can get his game together at the start of the regular season, this Steelheads team, quite the threat in the Central Division, if not the Eastern Conference. So most of this team, they will be back next year, which is going to bode really well as they prepare for Brampton. But how they handle the goaltending is going to be interesting because both Leenders and Ivan Kovic, I believe, are capable starting goaltenders. So it's going to be hard for those two unless they do a rotation where one plays one game and then one the next. But you're going to have two goaltenders here that are going to want to play, and I'm curious as to how the Steelheads are going to handle that situation. But still, it's a good problem to have because you know you've got the strength in net and you've also got the strength up front. This is a very talented Steelheads hockey team. And when you look at the overagers who are graduating, yes, these are big players from their lineup, Dean Locus, Mark Boudreau, and Chaz Sharp. But their overage candidates for next season, Stevie Leskovar. That's it. They only have one 2004-born player on their roster. They did have Xander Vecchia and Justin Dazzotti, but they were traded during the regular season. So for Leskovar, he's the only overager at this moment in time on the Steelheads team. So, like I said in the previous videos, there's teams like Guelph and Owen Sound who have 8 candidates each. So look for Mississauga to have some pickings here as to who they want to bring in those 2 overage positions. Those are 2 valuable spots that Mississauga is going to look to take advantage of because they've got a very young core. And I at this point on paper, Mississauga looks like the team to beat in the Eastern Conference. Although Oshawa, they're going to be good again next year, so look out for them. It could be a Mississauga-Oshawa 1-2 punch at the top of the Eastern Conference standings next year. But obviously, that's on paper. We need to play the games to figure out how these teams will actually match up. But I really like what this Steelheads team's doing. Plus, at the draft, they had a great draft if it works out. Adam Valentini, he fell to the 9th spot, so the Steelheads were able to pick him up. The question marks with Valentini were, would he report or commit to the Ontario Hockey League, or would he go to the USHL? From my understanding, there's a good possibility that Valentini will play for the Steelheads. That's from what I'm hearing, but I know there's still the doubt, the question marks, and that's why he fell out of the top 3 all the way to number 9. Would he or would he not commit? And I think if he commits, that's a huge win for the Steelheads team. You're just adding more talent because Valentini at one point this year was considered potentially the first overall pick at the OHL draft, but because of the undecidedness, he fell from the top, and Mississauga kind of benefiting from there. Plus, the Steelheads took a chance on Zach Nyman. He's considered to many as the top defenseman in the 2024 OHL priority selection, and he's committed to play for Penticton in the BCHL. But the Steelheads, taking a risk, and they decided to draft him. They picked him up in the 5th round with the 94th pick. So if they can get Nyman and Valentini both to commit, you kind of have to look at the Steelheads as the big winners from the 2024 OHL draft. Or even if they just get one of the two, still, that's a good boost for the Steelheads. So this team looking very good going into 24-25. And, well, that's why I think this team's considered to many as a favorite in the Eastern Conference. But we'll have to wait and see how things all pan out. And this is how I see it from the booth. Let me know in the comment section down below your thoughts on the Steelheads going into next season. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe. We'll talk to you again soon.